read in 2 Peter 1, 3 through 4. And it says, "By his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. We have received all this by coming to know him, the one who called us to himself by means of his marvelous glory and excellence." And because of his glory and excellence, he has given us great and precious promises. These are the promises that enable you to share in his divine nature and escape the world's corruption caused by human desires. So we started out talking about the promises that God makes so that we can live like he hopes we will. And these promises give us his power, which enable us to share in the very nature and character of God. We have to share his character because he gives us that power. We don't have to have all of it ourselves. Once we find Jesus and we submit ourselves to him, we accept him as Lord, he pours his Spirit into us, and that Spirit is active within us. And so it does things for us. It teaches us. It reminds us. It corrects us. And so in this same way, he's given us these promises, and by his Spirit, he's given us the ability to not only enjoy those promises, but follow him and his character and his ways. His power are within us. And all of those help us in many ways. But they help us, one way they help us is to help us increase in purity. And maybe it wasn't last week, but a couple weeks ago, we were talking about purity and what it means. And so we're going to dig deeper into that today. Because he says those same promises and that same power give us the power to escape the corruption of the world. And remember, a couple of weeks ago, I told you that purity doesn't mean clean. We usually think of it as that, like, oh, we want to be pure, so it means we won't do the wrong thing, or we won't look at the wrong stuff. We want to be pure. But pure just means of one source, of one element. Pure gold is only gold. It's not gold and another alloy and another metal. You might not know this, but if you've had any gold jewelry, it's almost never pure gold. Partly because gold is so soft that it would just bend. If you had a ring, you wouldn't be able to keep it in shape. Even like 24 karat gold, which is really high, in the amount of gold that's in that is a pretty small amount of gold actually in there because it's got to keep its shape. So they put other metals in there, they mix it in so that it'll be harder. But it's no longer pure. Doesn't make it bad, it's just no longer pure. Here, where God is talking about the idea of purity, he actually says that because we can accept his power and we can rely on his promises, that we can remain, once he pours the Spirit into us, we can remain of one source. What's been poured into us can remain pure and of one element, which in this case just means only God. Now, generally speaking too, we get the Spirit of God poured into us, we celebrate, and then the very next thing we do is we walk out into the world. And we hear things, and we see things, and we remember things, and things happen to us that start diluting that one source that's in us. So now we don't just have the Spirit of God within us, we have the spirit of fear, or we have the spirit of pride. And now we've got two things to wrestle with there, and that's mostly where we all live our lives, with some measure of mixture in there. The problem is that to a large degree, we actually want that mixture. Most of us are uncomfortable being just filled with God. We want to be filled with God, but we also want to be entertained. And so entertainment means looking on our devices and watching movies and listening to music, and a high percentage of the time, that stuff is not of God. Now, some of it is not of God specifically, but not all that great. And so we think, it's not all that bad. And so we listen to that, or we watch that, or we do those things. And then what happens is we're no longer of one element. We've got mixture in there. So that tells us that not only is maybe purity not all it's cracked up to be, but I'm doing okay right now. And you know what else sounds good? And then we take another step into that and we watch things that are even worse. Or we listen to stuff that's even worse. Now that stuff is getting in there. Sometimes we don't do it on purpose, but most of us actually want a little bit of mixture. We think the world is pretty cool. And we think that God a lot of times and Jesus a lot of times isn't all that cool. But then we don't realize why we struggle. I read the Bible, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We have all this other stuff that goes on in our lives. You know what, I feel like I want what I want, and so when I don't get it, I just have a tantrum, whatever. You know, we all throw these kind of fits because we've got that mixture in there. So when we talk about purity here, it means of one source, and we want to protect that one source. When we go about our lives out in the world in a culture that at best is indifferent toward God, they don't really care one way or the other, but in many cases actually hostile toward God and the things of heaven, it can be difficult not to become corrupted, like it says here, escape the world's corruption. It's tough to not become corrupted by that culture. And when we spend time with people who are far from God and allow those people to influence us more than Jesus, then the ideas and the practices and the values that they have get poured over us, if not into us. And those all become a corrupting influence. They dilute that one source that's in here. That word that Peter's using there that we translate as corruption is a Greek word that means decay or ruin. So decay would be like if you leave your bike out and it rains and rains and rains and never stops raining. It's just raining all the time. It's very moist. In some places, you'll find it'll start to rust. And rust continues on and it eats through things. You may see maybe you see some metal that gets all kind of brown and crumbly. That is rust. That's decay. It's coming apart. It's falling apart in some way. And so that's what that means. When the corruption of the world gets into and it dilutes what's inside of us, then things just start crumbling away. It means they won't last. They ruin. And if we're continually diluted by the ways of the world, we're no longer of one source, no longer pure. But God gives us the power and the ability to escape all of that through His great and precious promises. Escape by His great and precious promises. So let's look at those. And mostly today we're going to focus on 1 Timothy 4. And so let's start in verse 12, which is right here. It says, "Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and in your purity." And that's our memory challenge for next week. Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young or any age. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. What this tells us is that even a young person, or any person for that matter, can lead and be a godly example in many ways, including purity. Now, in this specific letter, Paul is writing to a young pastor whose name is Timothy. But these principles are transferable, which means they'll work for any of us who, if we are hoping to increase in purity or the other characteristics on that list. So faith and purity, as well as the way we live, love, speak. Then the next few verses unlock how we increase in each of those elements. So in the next verse, in 1 Timothy 4:13, it says, Paul tells Timothy, God is telling us, Focus on reading the scriptures to the church. Encouraging the believers and teaching them. So he says to all of us, focus, for one thing, which is tough for a lot of us, even right now, I'm sure. He says, focus on reading scriptures, encouraging others, and teaching others. It doesn't have to just be in a church setting. It doesn't just have to be in a teaching setting. In our lives, if we read the scriptures regularly, if we're generally encouraging others, and sometimes we understand all that well enough to teach others, then we are going to grow in all of those areas that Paul mentions. Also, here's another great element of this. You don't have to be great at any of these to start. As a matter of fact, Paul isn't expecting Timothy to be great at any of them. When he tells them, do this so that you'll increase in those areas. We know that because the very next thing that Paul says is how we get better at them. In 1 Timothy 4:15, Paul says, practice these things. You don't tell somebody to practice things if they're already great at them, if they're already doing them, unless somebody is already pretty darn good at them and they want to get better. That's why this is good news for everybody in this room. You could have been practicing this for 10 years, 2 years, 30 years. And if you want to increase in love and faith and purity in the way we speak, and who can't use some help from God in the way we speak about ourselves, to others, about others when they're not around, all of us can increase if we practice these things. So he says to Timothy, practice these things, immerse yourself in them, so that all may see your progress. So not only is he telling you, if you practice these things and immerse yourself in them, that people will see a change in you, he's telling you, you will have progress. Not only progress, but so much progress that people around you can't help but notice. Sometimes we call that fruit, spiritual fruit. Because not only are you having something change within you, but that change is actually not just good for you, it's good for the people around you. And it's obvious in such a way that people around you look at you and say, you have something I need. And they come and they want to take some of that fruit. So immerse yourself that all may see your progress. And that is setting an example for increase. Also, if you're reading something, knowing you're going to be expected to teach it, you read it differently, right? If you're reading your Bible and somebody says to you, hey, tomorrow I'd like you to lead the devotion on whatever it is you're reading right now. You're not just going to close up your Bible and go, God, okay, thank you, and go on about your day. You're probably going to immediately look down and think to yourself, do I even remember what I just read? Do I understand it? Could I tell anybody else anything about this? Or maybe you already thought that. Oh, I got so much out of that today. It really made sense to me. I think I'm going to live my life a little differently based on what I just figured out. And then they say, okay, teach that to somebody else tomorrow. The high likelihood is you're still going to go, well, what would I say? And you're going to go right back to that. So we read something differently when we know we have to explain it to somebody else. You read it with application in mind, which means you just naturally ask yourself questions like, how would I go about doing this? How do I do this? It's not enough just to read it and know what the words mean. You have to read it, know what the words mean, understand that it has value, and that I can take an action based on reading it. So how would I go about doing this? Or how would doing this be helpful for me? Or how would it be helpful for those around me? That's immersing ourselves in it. If we immerse ourselves, there's no way we don't increase in those areas. Purity, which really, again, just means of God in this context. Just God, only Jesus. Jesus, period. So it's different when you read, and it's just that you're simply trying to understand it for yourselves. So Paul says, practice and immerse yourself. Practice is primarily about reps, repetitions. If you are playing basketball and you end up going to the foul line a lot, and a lot you throw it up there and clang off the front of the rim, then somebody is going to say, hey, I've noticed you've been going to the foul line a lot. You're taking a lot of fouls. That's great, but if you get to the line and you miss all of those shots, it's no good for any of us. And so I'd like you to practice. And what does practice mean in that? It means you're not just going to go, okay, let me make sure my feet are in the right place. Let me make sure I'm on the line. I've got the ball. Okay, I think I'll be good. Right? That's not going to work. You take the ball and you shoot it. Clang. I'm not any better than I was a moment ago. Get the ball back. Clang. Darn it. Oh, you know what it is. Not getting enough knees in there. Clang. Okay, I got to try it again. See, reps, one after the other. And at some point you go, oh, you know what it is? I need to get off the floor. Oh, you know what it is? I'm not getting enough arch on this. Hey, you know what? I can make all this easier on myself. I'll just put it off the backboard. Just aim for that square and get it every time. Oh, there we go. Reps, practice. Practice is primarily about reps, but it's about repeating something over and over while at the same time looking for ways to improve as you go along. It's no good if what you're practicing is clang, clang, clang. That's no good. That's not practice. That's just reps. So this would be one reason that we need to read our Bibles and participate in devotions every day. It's practice. Notice that I didn't say read our Bibles every day and pay attention in devotions. Because again, what if I said participate in devotions, which doesn't always mean, wait, let me make a comment, or wait, I got an idea, or you know what else I thought about? If we're actually thinking to ourselves when we read our Bible and when we're listening and participating in devotions, if we're thinking those questions from earlier, how do I do this? When somebody else is reading or presenting a devotion, or even right now, if we're thinking to ourselves, how do I do this? How would doing this help me or help others around me? If we're thinking that every time we're sitting in devotions, then not only are we going to be more pure, more of one source, but we're going to increase in those things that Paul told us about, that God has promised to each one of us. And then what will happen is you will leave that moment, and later in the day, later in the week, I don't know, at some point, you're going to do something differently in your life. Or you're going to be about to do something, and you'll think to yourself, hold on, I should either stop or maybe stop and do something differently. And then I promise you, because he who promised is faithful, you're going to notice a difference. And it's going to be a good, positive difference. And then you're going to say to yourself, oh my goodness, this stuff works. And then the next day when you're reading your Bible, you're going to say, I'm going to figure out how this works. When somebody's doing a devotion, you're going to say to yourself, something in here is going to make me smarter, kinder, stronger, better in some way. I'm going to increase today. So it's not just enough to read. It's not just enough to listen when somebody else is reading. It's your responsibility to take that and say, I'm going to find something in here. I'm going to figure something out. Just like when you're on the basketball court, if somebody says, hey, you're missing all those foul shots, and then they say, hey, get out there and practice, but you don't say, I'm going to figure this out, you're not going to get any better. you're going to just practice clanging it right off the front of the rim. Maybe you get smart and you go, you know what? I can't figure this out on my own. So you say, hey, coach, what am I doing wrong? Guarantee you, every single coach, I can't believe you asked. I'm so glad you asked. Because there are people around you in your life. They're watching you go through your life and they're going, wow, just clanged it again. Oh, just clanged it again. It's so simple. People around you who are already doing this and trying to practice that staying of one element, it becomes pretty easy to stand near that and go, I can see what you're doing wrong here. That's why a lot of times in churches, people are all upset because you got a lot of people standing around you going, look at what you're doing wrong. Can I tell you what you're doing wrong? Let me tell you something else you're doing wrong. That's wrong. Hey, everybody, isn't this wrong? Yeah, it's wrong. And so we go, well, I don't want to be around any of you. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to figure this out, then when you're surrounded by those people, you find the ones who have figured it out. You don't have to listen to all of them. If you're at a practice and you're clanging them off the rim and you're the only one out there, you got a whole bench full of people who think they know better than you. But they're not out there. You ask the coach. You ask the ones you know will make it better for you. And in this case, you got lots of people around you who you could ask. And even if nobody was around, you could ask God, Lord, I'm trying to get this right. I'm not getting anywhere. I feel like I did 2 weeks ago or a year ago. This isn't working, Lord. I need you to show me what I'm doing wrong here. I need you to show me how to do this better. And again, he is faithful. So we got practice and immersion. The difference between practice and immersion is practice is primarily about reps. Immersion is just about surrounding yourself. It's like jumping in the pool. You jump in the pool, you can't not get wet. Because, especially if you go under the water, you are immersed. There's water all around you. So, if that water is good, then it's good for you. By the same token, if you're like, I don't want to listen to any of this, and you immerse yourself in stuff that's out in the world, the bad stuff, then you can't help but have that get all over you. So to say to yourself, it's okay, I go to church on Sunday. It's cool. I do devotions. It's all right. I live at a Christian children's home. And then go out to school or work or wherever it is you go and just do what everybody else is doing. There's no way to not get wet. There's no way, because you're immersing yourself in the junk. Then you got to come back and get it all cleaned off. But if we immerse ourselves, like jumping in the pool, surrounding ourselves, it would be like not only reading and sharing what we learn with others, like in the Bible, it would be like having worship music on while you're traveling somewhere. Like if you're in a vehicle and you've got music on and it's loud enough that you can hear the music over everybody that's in the vehicle, you are surrounded, you are immersed in sound. So if it's worship music, people lifting up Jesus, singing to God, about God, then you're going to get immersed in being pointed toward God and reminded who he is. You could do the same thing when you're cleaning the house or just doing a project. Just have that music on. It would have some sort of benefit. Now, if you tune it out, it has less benefit. But if you listen, immerse yourself in it, it carries with you. I mean, I know we sang Made for More here a good number of times. I don't know, maybe it was 6 times. But it was only 6 times. But you know what? Some of you immersed yourself in that so that when somebody puts that song on a few days ago, everyone could sing it. You may have even thought to yourself, I didn't try to learn this song, but you were immersed in it, and so it stuck. Same can be true for some bad stuff, but you can make it true for stuff that will make you healthier, more spiritually healthy. So could be listening to worship music or watching a sermon online, or there's lots of videos that aren't necessarily sermons, not just one guy talking like this and blah, blah, blah the whole time, that help us understand the Bible and Jesus and the things of God. So if we have those on and we're immersing ourselves in that, I mean, when you watch something, you're kind of immersed in it, right? I mean, if you were watching a movie and you've got the surround sound and it's a big screen, you, to some degree, are there. It's exciting. You're engaged. We can do the same thing if we desire to with the ideas of God. TV, movie, whatever it might be. So if you're immersed in Scripture and you're trying to know it well enough to encourage those around you and to even maybe teach them, then what you've learned and what God has revealed to you will increase. It has to. And you'll increase in faith, in purity, as well as the way you live, love, and speak. One last verse. This is verse 16. It's 1 Timothy 4:16 says, "Keep a close watch on yourself." See, so even when you go through this whole process, you're practicing, you're immersing, and then on top of that, you got to look in the mirror. You got to be honest with yourself. Keep a close watch on yourself, and also at the same time on the teaching. And then Paul says, persist in this, which means stay after it. For by doing so, you will save both yourself and your hearers, those who hear you, those who are around you. So it's not just about increase, it's not just about doing better, it's about being rescued from what we've gone through here and what we experience here. Persist, stay after it. Don't give up or get lazy about these things. And if we stay on this path, we will continually discover God's path for us and even for others. We will increase.